I am unashamed. What about you?
So welcome back to the Unashamed podcast. I'm excited to be back in studio with you, Jase. You're not alone anymore.
What caused that, Al?
Well, it got awkward. When you weren't there, it got awkward.
Well, I know we had the ladies on. I missed a lot of stuff while I was gone.
Well, I hate to confess something. I did not know we were doing podcasts today until last night. Because in our world,
I sent notes.
Yeah, in our world, you know, if you want a week off or something, that's not allowed unless I feel like I'm angry this morning, but I'm actually.
We've already had, just so the audience will know, we've had about a 10-minute counseling session leading into this podcast. Maddie has been the counselor on set.
I'm treading lightly over here. I sense that I'm 1,000 miles
Zach,
away.
Are you tread lightly today?
I'm tread lightly today, not tread lively. I sensed it as soon as I put because Jase was over there without his earmuffs
well,
on.
It's a big week, so
it's hard. We got a lot
of podcasts this week. We're doing. There's a big event that by the time this airs, it'll already have happened. But the big Faith Family Freedom event is this weekend.
That's this weekend, which my wife is heavily involved in. And then there's a reality show going on.
Oh yeah.
And look,
by the way,
these people are following me around, seeing if something interesting is about to happen, and then they're like, "Hey, can we film this?" I mean, it literally is to that point.
Reality TV, folks, is not what it's cracked up.
I got my head on a swivel now because you have that feeling like you're being followed.
You do,
and so it's getting weird.
And then our favorite little niece, Bella, who's the only one who could pull off what she did yesterday, almost, I guess. She sent us all a text, apparently individually. And said,
I did not know you were going to be there.
I know, and none of us did. And so she said she had these new Duck Commander golf shirts, which I'm wearing one today. And she said, will y'all come over and take a picture on Willie's golf green? Because it's in the neighborhood, and it was last night. And I said, well, sure. For you, Bella, I'd do anything. So I show up, and there's Jep, and then Jase comes up.
I realized that I'd been part of a coup. Because we used to have a rule in our family that if you have an idea, okay, go see if the idea will work. And we kind of had an understood rule that this is not going to involve any other family member participating until we know this will work.
Yep.
You know,
it's part of the unspoken Robertson code.
Yeah.
That we didn't know we had, but is apparently in our DNA.
The problem is the next.
When you say work, what do you define work? What do you mean?
Well, it's like if you have an idea, so okay, so here's my niece. You know, she comes with an idea. Oh, I'm going to design these golf shirts. Well, I'm like, well, go see if the idea resonates with the people. And because if you have another idea, it's like, well, let me get you to wear it, and then we'll see if it'll sell. Well, then it becomes confusing. Are people
now is it you that selling
are people buying it because they saw Uncle Jase with the one on, or Uncle Al, or is it because they really like the shirt? So, but what we have a problem because the next generation, they weren't part of that meeting that said, look, if your best idea is get me to promote your idea, let's not do that, because what we'll do is spend our time trying to see if all your ideas work. Well, we kind of have that agreement.
We do.
But all those people who are doing that now, they were all little kids.
They were kids.
So they didn't get
it. Really is the next generation.
Well,
it is a revival, Joe.
So let me tell you, I hijacked that operation. Al, we were there for what? 5 minutes?
5 minutes, which is my kind of photo shoot. It didn't take a lot of time. It was hot yesterday.
Well, and she was like, wear your golf shorts and all that. Well, I came and I had a pair of slacks on because I thought, I ain't putting my bony little what little legs I have, I was like, there's a thin line between promoting something and horrifying.
Because Jase has the good fat burn genetics that Dad had, but he does have the bird legs to go with that too.
Oh, yeah. So I had a little pair of slacks on. I felt uncomfortable. I do play golf. So
Jase's shirt was tucked in. Me and Jep, not so much. By the way, Jep is now the fat one, which everybody's taking a turn, I guess, but Jase, and he never will, of being the fat brother. So that now it's Jep's turn. So he told me he's just waiting to make his move. So
I don't know. You never know.
I got a plan for him. You need to
I
tell him about the old PhD weight loss.
I told him. He's watching me.
Well, I mean, you got to remember though. I'm active, Al.
Yeah,
I tell you, like after this podcast, I'm going to go pick up my 2 chainsaws because I've had a number of trees fall in my yard, and my neighbor, who's from California and has yuppie tendencies, every time a tree falls on his property, he calls me, which kind of goes back to the same principle. If your best idea of cleaning up your yard is calling me, maybe we need to have a conversation. So my chainsaws were in need of repair, and I got them all fixed up. But that equals 10 pounds.
Yeah.
That I will lose just by fixing the chainsaws.
So that'll take care of that whole bag of chips you ate yesterday.
I told you that. Al's bringing up all my. I told you, I hadn't eaten a Zapp's Crawtator in a while.
Oh, good.
And it's Missy's fault. I went in there. She went grocery shopping, and she bought 2 of the biggest bags of Crawtator. She knows I love them, and I was so happy.
They need to sponsor the podcast.
I took a nap. I took a nap after I had done the reality show.
Yeah.
You know, that I didn't even know I was doing till the last minute. And I woke up from a nap. I was tired. And you know how when you just sleep like where you think you're literally coming back from the dead? Right. I mean, John 11 here. Yeah. You know, it's like, am I dead or did I take a nap? I was so hungry. And I just went in there and I said, I'm going to eat a couple of these apps just to get a little taste. I mean, 5 minutes later, I had eaten that entire bag, which got a response of, did you just eat that whole bag? I said, yeah, I'm picking up my chainsaws tomorrow. It'll be all right. And she was like, I have no idea what that means.
You're saying it's hard work.
He's gonna
have his brunt boots on. He's gonna be out there working.
Right now in Louisiana, if you walk outside, you just start sweating profusely.
Oh yeah.
So to finish my story, Al. So here's what happens. Because what happened yesterday in our let's take 2 pictures. It was very easy, very quick.
I was there early, so I finished and left. I left y'all there.
Right after you left, I'm walking to my golf cart.
By the way, Willie never showed for the pictures.
It was supposed to be the 4 brothers. He never showed up.
Supposed to be the 4 brothers. It was 3 brothers.
That his daughter organized.
At his house.
At his house, which is a short golf cart ride for me.
Yeah.
And so, they had the cameraman there, which I don't know why he was there. The little cameraman for Duck Commander, he films duck hunts. And I was like, what are you doing here? And he's like, well, I just thought something crazy may happen. So anyway, we literally were there 5 minutes, took 2 pictures. And I thought, why would you film this?
Yeah.
And so I'm walking to my golf cart, and then Bella said, how about we get 1 picture of you actually hitting a golf shot, Well, the cameraman was there. I said, turn that on. You never know what's fixed to happen. So I dropped a ball beside Willie's green. And I was like, get right behind the hole. I mean, what if I make it? And he was like, I'm not sure. I was like, the last time I chipped some golf balls around the green, which was in Omaha, I played terrible. I was like, I sculled every one of them. So, but I sculled
a couple yesterday.
I need this pressure to try to fix these chipping yips I have. So he got behind the hole. So the first chip, I was over anxious about not hitting, putting him in the hospital because he's literally.
Oh, so you're hitting right at him.
Oh, I'm hitting right at him, 25, 30 feet away. Yeah. I'm like 5 yards off the green. The pin is probably 15, 20 feet on, and he's right behind the hole, laying down. So I dropped another ball, and I said, okay.
Did he not know the danger he was in?
I warned him. I said, look, I've got the pitching yips, and I'm trying to fix it.
I would just wonder if the Duck Commander cameraman job included getting sculled with
So, Al, my second attempt, I flopped that thing out of the heavy rough on the green. It's in the hole. Made it. Second
so now it's
take.
On camera.
Oh, and I mean, I'm fist pump. I got the.
Well, there's the shot.
Well, then
I know what shot Bella's going to use.
Young Bella looked around and said, "I think we have something better than." so listen to this. The story gets better. So I'm like, I think that'll do it. if that won't sell them, I don't know. There's no trick photography. I literally just made it.
Right.
And so one of the assistants there, as I'm walking up to the golf cart, he said, I can't believe that just happened. And I said, you want me to do it again just to show you that wasn't an accident?
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah. And
You're
I was
backing it?
I was kidding, but I just thought, why not? Who knew? I literally dropped my bag, grabbed the ball, plopped it down, hit it. It's in the hole again from twice as far.
So they think you're some kind
And
of...
I don't know if they filmed that. I mean, surely someone had the camera going while that was
All
in.
you needed was a camera on you. So the interest rate you have on your mortgage is a big deal. It can make a lot of difference in how much you're paying. I bought and sold a lot of homes over the years. It's been one of Jill and I's primary vehicles of investment. And that's where our friends at Sierra Pacific Mortgage come in. These guys are amazing. Rates are still high right now, and that can make a difference in your refinancing or if you're purchasing, and it can make it feel out of reach. But markets can shift fast. I'm telling you. And when they do, you want to be ready. You want to be in the strike zone and ready to move. And so our friends at Sierra Pacific Mortgage, Andrew and Todd, and these guys are amazing, and their whole team, they're going to get you set up, and they're going to keep you informed so that when the time strikes, you guys will be ready to move. With 40 years of experience, they really are the experts, and they make it easy because they keep everything in-house. Get pre-qualified today. Visit andrewandtodd.com. I would advise you to do it now so that you can get a spot in the front of the line before the rest of the herd jumps in when the market drops. And when the market does enter that strike zone, you guys will be ready to strike first and save big. Call Andrew Del Rey and Todd Avicki and the guys I trust, and they can help you too. Call 888-888-1172. That's 888-888-1172, or visit andrewandtodd.com. That's andrewandtodd.com.
So I made 2 out of 3 pitch shots.
Well, you may have fixed your yips by
Well,
the
that's
photo
what
shoot.
I'm thinking.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking. And so now,
Because there's so much feel, that shot, what you're talking about is all feel, and it's easy to lose it. The pros, I guess they just get so locked in, they never
I
lose
never
it.
had it.
well, the second one, I have to admit, there was some luck because it was harder struck. It went in the hole. It basically hit the back of the pin and went in. It just looked more lucky. The first one looked perfect. I mean, it just rolled up there and just fell in the hole.
Right.
And he had the camera because I said, I want to see that. He literally could not have been zoomed up anymore. You see the shot, the ball just looks huge.
And so just
and it's
watches
just
it.
coming toward the hole. And you're like, it just at the last second started to tail off and just whoop, in the hole. So I'm sure that's coming to an internet
Now,
video.
We
near
call
you.
that the money shot, Zach.
Yeah, what's the update? You were in New Orleans.
So I missed the podcast on the last one she did with the ladies because Lisa and I were in New Orleans, which is where she had her breast cancer surgery a little over a year ago. And so we've been back once for a checkup. What happens is within 3 years of breast cancer, there's the highest chance that you may get it back is within the first 3 years. So they see you pretty often to do that. And so we had our 1 year checkup. And, we've been confident through this whole process, but at the same time, you always have a little bit of angst. But tests turned out great. No cancer. The doctors were great, and as soon as I walk in, the first thing we have there's a plastic surgeon person that kind of puts you back together, and then also an oncologist. And the first thing they said to me is, "Man, what happened to you? Where's the rest of you?" So there you go, PhD. And but then we had a great conversation. Both of them talked about Dad and the influence he had on them and the world, which I thought was really neat. They were both very appreciative of his work too. And so one of them said, "Well, I watched the funeral," and I said, "Well, you and a few million others." I said, "Dad wanted one last chance to get the gospel out," which he did.
Yeah.
So which is pretty powerful.
fantastic.
So thank you for all the prayers out there. You guys are awesome. Praying for that.
Well, I thought the girls did good on the podcast.
Yeah, I want to know how you guys. So y'all dipped a little bit ahead into John 11. I understand.
Missy, she does a little program where she mentors women. I think they're, what'd she say, in between the ages of 20 and 30, somewhere in there. And she does a little bit from John 11, kind of from the Mary Martha perspective. Right. So it was good. And then we had, which ironically, I had to interrupt her one time because she did most of the talking because she had this little lesson. But one time she had gone on about a 7-8 minute rant like I do all the time.
I was going to say, it's all in the family.
But I thought, at the end of the day, this is a conversation. So I kind of interrupted her, So
Did she give you the look?
yeah, she gave me that look.
She got the look.
So I had to explain.
Which is why they don't do appearances together, by the way.
Well, and I'll tell you what I didn't do. I did not take the opportunity or seize the opportunity to stoke a controversy between Jase and his wife, like you guys did with me when I had Jill on.
Well, I was waiting for it. What you don't realize is I was waiting for you
If
to
only
do
I
that.
had been here.
And if you would have gone that road, I had a line that I was ready to do. But you, fortunately for you, didn't go down that road.
So you were going to reverse it on me, and
I was. You know what I was going to say?
What's that?
I was going to say, because I never mentioned this to Zach until now, but I'm doing it in a friendly way. The difference in me and you, I was going to say, is when you went to the national championship run in basketball with Florida.
And didn't invite your wife.
You left your wife at the house. And when I went to the LSU national championship,
She was sitting
run,
right next to you.
right next to me, all snuggled up with the
That would've
greatest
worked.
seats in the world.
That would have worked.
And so whatever you were gonna say, that was my
you
comeback.
had a trump card.
That would have
You
been
certainly had-
have been a rebound right back to you.
Jill's
Yeah.
face would have turned red.
Yep.
And oh, by the way,
Crimson red.
That's good.
I don't read the comments and things like that. I deal with real people. But I went out in public yesterday, and I mean, literally 7 out of 8 people. I guess this episode we did about the bats is out there, and
Yeah.
I get it. If I put a grate on my chimney, that would stop the problem. I've already addressed that. we're having that done. It's like everybody I bumped into, they were like, "Here's what you need to do. I got a guy who can put a grate on your chimney," and then the next person I meet, they're like, "Here's what you do about the bat." I get it. I should have thought of that. It never registered that. Well, maybe if we keep the bats out of the chimney,
Yeah.
that would help the.
Well, especially
Problem.
since you've had it before. Yeah, they're just
Well, but they didn't come in the chimney before.
Yeah.
The first time my daughter left her door open.
okay.
That was a whole different scenario.
Okay, I didn't
This
realize
was one big. The time before was one big group, a flock of bats that flew in my house, synchronized,
Yeah.
for 3 days.
Yeah.
So
It was
this
it was a
here
Batman.
was just bats coming out of the fireplace every couple of hours.
Well, I thought
they
about-
were way more in attack mode than the first.
I thought
were.
about you because night before last when we got home, when I went to open my door, there was a bat that was lit on the wreath on my front door.
Seriously?
Yeah, and I started to open the
I think
door,
we have
and
a-
it flew out right
Yeah.
by my face, and I was like, "Oh, what a Jase's bat!"
Yeah. I
So
think
he was trying to get in my house, but he didn't.
there's definitely been an influx in plagues on Louisiana this year with bats and flies.
Yeah,
I mean, everybody I've talked to they've seen more bats and more flies this year. So I'm not sure what that means.
I don't know what it means either. Well, I love it anytime the ladies are on. So I hate I missed it, but I'm sure they filled in and did a great job. I don't know what all you guys got done in John 10, but
Well, do you really ever get it done?
You don't.
I mean, maybe if you pick up, I noticed a couple of interesting things.
did y'all talk about the just the imagery idea of you brought it up, Jase, the last time I was on the podcast, maybe 2 or 3 podcasts ago, about the idea that the ideal king seems to be modeled by a shepherd more than a kind of what the world sees in a king. And
We brought that up, and because when you think of power, I mean, just think of like a CEO. I mean, now in America, when you think of powerful people, you think about celebrities or CEOs
Right.
or government officials. Well, what happens is they become untouchable.
right,
You can't get access to these people.
right.
And it's a power thing. So when you think about Jesus being a shepherd for the sheep, I mean, he's taken that idea of power and turning it on its head because he's out there with the flock. He knows them by name. when he says them. You know, it's like a CEO. Just think of I don't know, pick a CEO of one of the world's largest companies. He doesn't know the employee's name. He's like, who are you?
Yeah.
You know, they're way down the ladder. And so I think this is way more personal. And it's way more powerful when he's like, and I lay down my life for the sheep. So,
and I also think, Jase, it's this idea of dependence on God, because if you think about it, the two biggest examples I think of when I think of this imagery that Jesus brings up here, the first one is Moses, which, Zach, you're right in the middle of this in your preaching, is, you know, Moses was raised in the house of Pharaoh, learned how to be a king of the greatest dynasty on earth at the time, the Egyptians. At 40 years old, he thinks it's his time to rule because he's been raised for this moment. He goes out here and he has his moment. He kills this guy that's, you know, abusing this Hebrew person, and he thinks this is his moment to seize the day, and it doesn't work at all. And so he winds up down in the desert doing, guess what? Herding sheep for 40 years before that call comes in the burning bush. And so I think about that example, and then I also think about David, because Saul was made king because he was a head taller than everybody else. He looked the part. The people wanted him. And God told Samuel, he said, he's not the man, but you know what? If you want him, you got him. And he was the most counterculture, untrusting, weak person you can imagine. You just go back and read about Saul. And then guess who God picks? He picks this young guy out tending sheep, the runt of the family. And Samuel even got fooled because in 1 Samuel 16, you know, when the sons come out, he says, ooh, this Eli, the oldest one, Elihu, he's there. Got to be the guy. Look how big and strong he is. And God's like, nope, you're still looking at the wrong thing. And it winds up being David. So I just, when I look at this imagery, part of it, I think, is like you said, Jase, it's the relationship with the sheep. And then part of it is a dependence on God. That, in other words, the power is in not my ability to be king, but the idea that I have a dependence on God, which Jesus has no problem saying I and the Father are one, you know?
Yeah.
We talked in the last podcast about how in like when Jesus is defining himself as the shepherd, or what we said is that the reason why we typically don't trust Jesus is because we don't believe that he's powerful enough to do what he said he's going to do, or we don't think he's good. And so this picture of the good shepherd, I mean, think about, like, if you go back to Psalm 23, that says, the Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want.
David, right, exactly.
Written by David.
Yeah.
He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. So you read that psalm, and he's talking about Jesus, and Jesus is saying, I'm the Lord, I'm the guy, I'm the shepherd from Psalm 23. That's me. I'm the one, and I'm good.
Don't you think it's interesting that, because they had that show, what was the show they had? What was it called? The House of David?
Yeah.
And really they kind of tell the story, but it all culminates, I guess, when David, and they just built this up so much, when he went and got the 5 stones out of the river, and here's Goliath, and the crowd had the same response toward David. What are you going to do? You think you're going to defeat this giant who's just taunting, which kind of used that to his advantage, because he underestimated his opponent, because he didn't realize that if God is fighting the battle, the giant's going down. But I think it's interesting.
And it's an analogy, Jase, that's been used for thousands of years since. David and Goliath. How many times do you hear it?
But what I'm saying is he rose to greatness with one stone that hit the giant. And you say, what's your point? Well, here's Jesus coming in the seed line of David, the Lion of Judah. And then he tells this beautiful illustration about shepherding sheep, and I lay down my life, and I'm from the Father. And then what were the people's response to that? You see this in the back half. Well, I'll read it. They pick up stones, and they want to stone him. And so, like in verse 31 of chapter 10, again, the Jews picked up stones to stone him.
Yeah.
Isn't this ironic?
Yeah.
Where he came in the seed line of David, who picked up a stone at God's command
That's right.
and defeated the enemy. And now here's Jesus, who is the fulfillment of David and a greater king and a greater prophet and person than Moses.
Right.
Because you brought up Moses, but think about it. God used him to part the sea, part the water. Well, Jesus walked on the water.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, remember when Moses struck the rock?
Yeah.
And they said that rock was Christ. Well, Jesus would say in John 7, there'll be living water come out from within you. I mean, not just like a rock over there on our trail and he's that's a sign that Christ is with us. He'll be in you and living streams will bubble up from within your body through his spirit. I mean, which is better, is what I'm saying. So they pick up rocks, gonna stone him, and I wanted to read this because it just popped into my head. And Jesus said to him, this is verse 32 of chapter 10, I have shown you many great miracles from the Father. For which of these do you stone me? And they said, we are not stoning you for any of these, replied the Jews, but for blasphemy. And here's the point. Because you, a mere man, claim to be God. And that was their view of Jesus. He was just a mere man. He was from the wrong place.
Yep, wrong side
He
of the
didn't
track.
have the right look, which goes into your illustration about David. He hadn't picked up a stone and defeated some major, oppressive force, which was Rome. In their mind, if you want us to follow you, how about go
Take care
whoop
of Rome.
Rome with a few rock, David style,
Right.
and then we'll follow you. So I just think it's interesting.
No, and I think it also shows you, Jase, the dichotomy that exists with earthly kings, even one like David, who God loved, who established his covenant through his offspring that the Messiah would come. David picked up 5 stones, which a good warrior will do, just in case I missed for the first one, I got 4 more behind it. But with God, it only takes 1. And so that's what's amazing about Jesus. And I thought about this verse in Deuteronomy 6, verse 4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Even way back then, at the very beginning, before anybody was realizing it, he was saying there's a oneness in God that will then be seen through Christ that's different. And that's what makes Jesus so different. He knows already that he's the one that's supposed to be the king. And that was because David was such a warrior, and he was a warrior for the Lord, but he was such a warrior that when he wanted to build the temple, God said, nope, too much blood on your hands. Too much bloodshed. He said, it'll have to come through your son, which it did.
Yeah.
So even then, it shows you the weakness of human kings, that it becomes a bloodlust and a thirst for power. Even the greatest of our kings cannot be the king.
Even the ones after God's own heart, right? You
Exactly.
mentioned, Jason mentioned how Jesus is really overturning the power dynamic here and the power structure. And what I think is interesting about this passage too is he does establish both his goodness and his authority. So Jesus establishes, I'm the good shepherd in verse 11, but then he says, for this reason in verse 17, the Father loves me because I lay down my life that I may take it up again. No one takes it from me. That's quite the statement, that nobody takes Jesus' life from him, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down, and I have authority to take it up again. This charge I have received from my Father. So in this passage, Jesus is establishing both his sovereignty and his power and authority, and he's establishing his goodness. And it made me think of that passage in Ezekiel 34, where where the Lord really chastises shepherds who are not good. They may have authority and power, but they're not actually good, and they treat the weak with oppression, and they take advantage of them. And this is what it says. It says, the word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, prophesy against the shepherds of Israel. Prophesy and say to them, even to the shepherds, thus says the Lord God, ah, shepherds of Israel, who have been feeding yourselves. Should not shepherds feed the sheep? You eat fat, you clothe yourselves with wool, you slaughter the fat ones, but you do not feed the sheep. The weak you have not strengthened, the sick you have not healed, the injured you have not bound up, the stray you have not brought back, the lost you have not sought, and with force and harshness you have ruled them. This is the authority structure that's being turned over. So they were scattered because there was no shepherd, and they became food for all the wild beasts. My sheep are scattered. They wandered over all the mountains on every high hill. My sheep are scattered over the face of the earth, and there was no one to search for them or seek for them. Therefore, you shepherds, hear the word of the Lord. As I live, declares the Lord God, surely because my sheep have become a prey, and my sheep have become food for the wild beasts, since there was no shepherd, and because my shepherds have not searched for my sheep, but the shepherds have fed themselves and have not fed my sheep. Therefore, you shepherds, hear the word of the Lord. Thus says the Lord God, behold, I am against the shepherds. I will require my sheep at their hand, and I will put a stop to their feeding the sheep. And then he basically, in the very next part, says, I'm going to be the shepherd. I'll feed my sheep. I'll find my sheep. I'm going to be the shepherd. And so Jesus is establishing that he is going to overturn the entire power dynamic, and he has the authority to do it, and he has the good intentions for what's best for us.
Yeah, I think a good question to ask yourself is my life reflecting Jesus just as a mere man?
Yeah.
Is if you look at your life, the way you're, living your life, is he just a mere man, or is he who he said he was? Because I think the most important part of this that I've gotten out of this is that, he starts off saying, I tell you the truth. I tell you the truth. He said, I am the truth. And I had a whole list of verses that go back to John 1 when he's like, the law came through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus.
Yep.
And he's think of the woman at the well. He's like, the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. He keeps bringing this up because we tend to think truth, I got to go find out, which doctrine is right or which, rabbit hole, put all this. It's just like random words and philosophies. And here's Jesus saying, I am the truth. The truth is a person. It's not just a mere man.
Right.
He embodies truth. Well, he does the same thing with the resurrection on the I am in the next chapter when he starts talking about, Lazarus, he's just asleep. I'm going to wake him up, and then he eventually says, I am the resurrection. Because she starts talking about philosophy. Well, we know that he'll be raised at the last day. So all I'm saying is, he's saying resurrection is a person.
Yeah.
It's not I'm not a mere man. I'm embodying these principles. And I think it really changes the way you study the Bible. Because at the end of the day, you go back to a person that is embodying this. It kind of helps you with trying to figure out all the times and dates and all the arguments over when the resurrection is going to occur and all the detail. And the same thing with truth. It's like if his lips are moving, truth is just being unveiled in mighty ways that should really stop you in your tracks. And I want to bring up one other thing just to ask y'all about this. I looked this up with all scholars because, every once in a while you read something and you think, well, this is weird. So I want to go see what everybody says about it. Crickets. But I want to ask y'all, so I'm putting you on the spot here. I think it's really interesting that the wording in verse 11, he says, because he repeats himself, he says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. But then in verse 15 or 14, he says this again. I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me, just as the Father knows me. So, because Zach had just mentioned this is why I wanted to bring it up. And I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. Well, now, did he say the exact same phrase? If you look at it closely, this is what I looked up. The first time he says it generally. He says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. But the second time he says it in verse 15, he makes this comparison in the vein of I'm not a mere man because me and the Father are one. Just as the Father knows me and I know the Father. and I lay down my life for the sheep. So he goes from general to real personal. So I thought, is he actually saying that in general, the Father, this is a reflection of his love, is laying his life down for the sheep through me? And then he's like, and I'm laying down my life for the sheep. Because he did it in the vein of me and the Father. I'm here, I'm getting my authority from that. I don't know if y'all have ever thought about that, but you see the difference in the sentences? The sentence breakdown is, I'm the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down. What all the scholars said was, because they were intrigued by it, like I was, but they didn't know what it meant. And they were like, well, it's just he was making a general statement, and then he was saying, I'm making a personal statement. But I thought, but he's doing it in the context of him and the Father doing this as one.
Yeah.
So it seemed like to me, he's like, this is the Father's plan, and I'm the manifestation of the plan.
Which, it's like was it Mike Tyson said, everybody's got a plan till you get hit in the mouth?
Yeah.
And the plan was there, but when Jesus is actually here on the earth as a man, then that makes the plan even more real than it ever was.
I think that's the point. I think
too.
I've stumbled on something that maybe the scholars have missed, because they're detaching it from the Father. But I'm like, well, his whole point was saying, I'm from the Father. It's always that rule when the Bible repeats itself. You're like, well, wait a minute, let me read that again. Because I thought, why did he just say that?
Here's what I think proves that you're right. When you fast forward into the garden on the eve of when it all is fixing to go down, and you see this wrestling match that the Son of Man is having as the Son of God with God. See what I'm saying? Like, it's about to happen, the anguish of the moment. There's anguish there. I mean, you see the wrestle that goes in of any man knowing that they're about to make a huge sacrifice. We would all know that experience, but nothing like he was doing, because all of his divine nature was about to be on display in a terrible way, in an abusive, awful way for people to watch. So I think that proves exactly what you're saying. There's the decision to do something, and then there's the decision to make it happen, and those are two different things. I think
that was from the Father's perspective the first time in verse 11, and then it was from his perspective in verse 15. And look, the reason I had this, it wasn't like I had the idea. I read the whole chapter numerous times. And so when he gets to where we haven't covered in verse 25, because they said in verse 24 that the Jews said, how long will you keep us in suspense? If you're the Christ, tell us plainly. Well, where does he go with that question? Jesus answered, I did tell you, but you do not believe. Yeah. The miracles I do, look what he starts talking about again. In my Father's name, speak for me. It's back to this oneness with the Father. But you do not believe, because you're not my sheep. My sheep listen to my voice. I know them, and they follow me. I give them eternal life, and they shall never perish. No one can snatch them out of my hand. My Father, who has given them to me, is greater than all. No one can snatch them out of my Father's hand. I and the Father are one.
Yeah, back to that Deuteronomy passage, yeah.
I think it's the same point of this connection, which when you get away from this, you get into all sorts of doctrines that are crazy to me. But I think that was his point, because they thought he was a mere man, and he's like, you don't understand. I'm the Son of the Father. The plan is he wants to lay down his life.
Which he's
for the sheep.
He's actually anchoring his coming death. He's anchoring the cross, which is actually really profound as I'm thinking this out here. He's anchoring the cross itself in the very nature of God. And so it moves it from a transaction. Because if you think about like a sheep, the sheep analogy only goes so far, right? Because, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, I'm going to take care of my sheep, but it's really a transaction. I'm a shepherd because I'm actually going to sell them at some point. I'm not like in a...
Well, he made that point when he said, when a wolf comes, the hired hands, they take off running. But if you own them, if these are reflections and images of you yourself that you made, well, it's a little different story.
Because he's elevating it in that second statement when he says, I am the good shepherd, I know my sheep, and my sheep know me. Well, what does he mean by that? Well, he explains it. Just as the Father knows me and I know the Father. So now he's talking about real intimacy. This is actually unabridged or unadulterated intimacy between the Father and the Son, which is completely perfect. Like it's an intimacy between two persons that's so pure that they're actually one person or one being, sorry. And so that's when he says, I lay down my life for the sheep. He's anchoring that laying down the life in the very nature of who God is. And it makes me think of that 2 Peter passage where it says that we've been invited to partake in the divine nature. This is a beautiful picture because he's actually elevating what it means to be a sheep. To be a sheep with Christ is to have the intimacy that Christ has with the Father, we have with Christ. And you really see that play out through the entire book of John, particularly when you get to John 17. It kind of flows all into that idea of unity.
Exactly. I was going to the same place. And I just wanted to bring up, the reason I'm bringing this up is because people go here to try to make arguments about, they're reading this part about the Father who has given them to me is greater and no one can snatch them out of my Father's hand. And they try to make doctrines on, well, this means once saved, always saved, these little pithy statements.
Catchphrases,
Yeah, and they get that because, from verse 9, when it says, I am the gate, whoever enters through me will be saved. When we see the word saved, we immediately think, well, there's a transaction that happened. But there's a little letter by that word saved, and you look down and it says, or kept safe.
Yeah.
And you got to look at the big picture here. It's not a one-time kind of thing. That word, when you look at that word save used here, and look at how many times that's used, and I encourage you to do that. Go look up that word in the Greek, and look every saved in verse 10:9, and look everywhere it's used, because you know what you'll find fascinating? That same word is used by the disciples in chapter 11. That same word is used when Jesus said in verse 11, after he had said this, he went on to tell them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm going there to wake him up. His disciples replied, Lord, if he sleeps, he will get better. Will you say that phrase, he will get better? Same word that's used in John 10. And what I found fascinating is that word is used all over the place in the Gospels where it says, do you want to get well? Remember when he asked, I forgot which story that was, but when I think that was the guy that had been hanging out in the pool, and he said, do you want to get well? Well, that same word.
Yeah.
Get well, restored, made
saved.
Whole. Yeah, saved. I mean, it's used in a lot of different ways, kept safe. And my whole point of bringing this up is this picture of the shepherd and the sheep, and Jesus being the shepherd, and I know my sheep. He's like, there's an enemy. There are powers. To Zach's point, he is saying that my power is going to be shown in a different way. But there are other powers who are going to attack you. They're going to try to lure you. And we know one at least is the evil one.
Which he mentions here in verse 10.
Yeah. And that's the context of John 10. So when he says no one's going to be able to snatch you, because there's other powers who are out to do you harm.
Yeah.
And they blind you. They lie to you. They'll kill you.
They steal.
They'll
take
kill. You. They'll use you for something, and then you look up and they're gone, and you're suffering the consequences.
Yeah.
And I'm only saying, I'm not trying to make some big philosophical argument. I'm just trying to say this is the context of what he's saying. And you see the same thing in the book of Revelation. But go ahead while I'm turning there.
No, I when you think about that, the phrase "once saved, always saved," or like a pithy statement like that. I grew up, man, having those discussions as kids, and is you believe in once saved, always saved, and I'm like, man, it seems like that. Even that phrase, I mean, it just reduces the entire gospel to something so trivial to me. Because if I'm asking that question, do I believe once saved, always saved? What I'm saying is, do you believe that one I do this thing one time, and then, okay, I'm good now. I'm good. I'm secure. And it kind of misses the whole point of what Jesus is saying here in verse 9. He says, I am the door, or on the gate. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will go, this is the part they leave off, and will go in and out to find pasture, to find those green pastures. He makes me lie down in pastures green, Psalm 23. And so the picture here really is, I'm thinking of like Jacob's ladder in Genesis 28, where heaven and earth meet. That's the access point, right? Where heaven and earth meet. And what Jesus is saying here is like, I'm the entry point. I'm the access gate. Because the presence of God is behind this curtain here. What you're being invited into is not simply a thing that just says you're secure. What you're being invited into is something that's relational. And if I apply the same logic to my marriage, and everything that I did was just to make sure that me and Jill, okay, we're secure. We're secure. Like, that's not really what a marriage is about, is making each other feel like no one's ever going to leave. Or, it's the point of a marriage is to find connection and intimacy.
Well, the word is, Zach, you didn't marry Jill as a transaction. You married it as a transformational life. And that's why you've grown together as a couple and will continue to until the moment that you breathe no more. And it's the exact same thing with Christianity. Is Jesus and his sacrifice transactional for you, or is it transformational for you? That's the difference.
Because that's where he's going in John, right? We won't get there today, but he's actually moving the conversation into the oneness that he has with the Father. Yeah. So he's building the case here for what real intimacy is, and intimacy beyond the transformation, beyond just a transaction.
Yeah. What I wanted to say is, I told Al I did this. I studied the whole book of Revelation in the last week, and I gave a little preview of that on one of the podcasts where I kind of summed up the first 7 chapters, because there's a lot in here about the lamb and the lion, and becoming a lamb and yet being the shepherd. And so I have this fresh on my mind, and I'm not going to go, because we're going to save the book of Revelation for our last hoorah when we go through it. But the reason I was drawn to it is because this same idea, it's all about this, what I believe, Revelation being the church being persecuted at the hands of Rome. And he writes to these 7 churches, and they're going to attack this power. Just think, it's a power struggle.
Right.
You have the evil one in cahoots with some earthly power, dishing it out toward people who have put their trust in Jesus, which is the greatest power. And I just wanted to read this one section in chapter 14 because I think it's very powerful. And he looked, and it says, there before me was the Lamb. We're back to this Lamb exalted at the right hand of God. And with him 144,000 who had his name and his Father's name written on their foreheads. And so immediately people get distracted. But I'm just going to tell you this now, and we'll revisit this later. But it's it's imagery representing the whole people of God.
Yeah.
And what I find fascinating is in Revelation, every time the followers of Jesus are depicted, they're always viewed as heavenly. It's like heavenly people. And every time you see the inhabitants on the earth or dwellers of the earth, it's always the people who are not in Jesus, which I find very interesting. Mm-hmm. It's like that's how the imagery depicted, which comes back to this, he won't allow anyone that the Father's given him to be snatched out of his hand. But then he goes on to say, so I know I made that without giving you all the details on why that represents the entire group of people, but one day when we go through Revelation, I'll show you. Then he says, and I heard a sound from heaven like a roar of rushing waters and like a loud peal of thunder. The sound I heard was like the harpists playing their harps, and they sang a new song before the throne and before the 4 living creatures, which is representative of the angelic world, and the elders. There's the humans. No one could learn the song except the 144,000 who had been redeemed from the earth, which kind of proves my point. This is the whole totality. It's like 12 times 12 times 1,000. These are those who did not defile themselves with women. And he's not being literal about anything. He's just saying they're trusting the voice of the shepherd. For they kept themselves pure. They follow the Lamb wherever he goes. That's the sentence I was trying to get to.
Yeah.
And so that is the picture of what we have in John 10. Where even no matter what the enemy is, whether it's Rome, whether it's the Jewish authority of Judaism who are wanting to stone Jesus, or, the temple that had turned corrupt that Jesus would pronounce judgment on, in which I believe that he's pronouncing judgment on Rome. These different powers, through the work of the evil one and his entourage that come up on Christians, our battle cry is, he's not just a mere man.
Yeah.
We're following him wherever he goes. And that's why I think John's vision depicts those as heavenly creatures and heavenly beings, because he's at the right hand of God.
Yeah.
He's won. We're victorious. The church is victorious.
And most people have made that about the future, but we believe it's about the now. All right, I got a good follow-up verse for that, but I'm going to save it for the next podcast, so we'll see you next time on Unashamed. Thanks for listening to the Unashamed podcast. Help us out by leaving a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. And don't miss an episode by subscribing on YouTube. And be sure to click the little bell and choose all notifications to watch every episode.